Gemini rising. Okay, so basically the rising sign is all about what you look like. It's all about how you act. It's all about your self-esteem, who you are, your identity. It's all about your soul. So that might sound like a lot of heavy topics, but I'm basically just explaining why the rising sign is the most important placement in your birth chart. Basically, the rising sign sets up the way that your birth chart wheel is supposed to look like. So this is why it's so important to have a really good birth time, because if you're just a few minutes off, it can literally change the whole configuration of what the chart looks like and literally what your life looks like, astrologically speaking, of course. Gemini rising. So the rising sign also equals the first house of self, body, identity, self-esteem, you know, all that good stuff about you. It's basically just you. Gemini is a mutable air sign. So mutable energy is very adaptable. It's very adaptable to its surroundings, and air energy is all about mindset and communication. So whenever you put those together, you get Gemini energy. Geminis are usually very smart. Something I've noticed is that Gemini placements tend to have very small like fingers and feet, and also tend to be like on the skinnier side. Obviously not all of you guys, but Gemini is ruled by Mercury, right? Mercury is the planet of traveling, communication, thoughts, ideas, you know, pretty much everything that makes the world what it is. The world cannot go around without any of those things, and obviously the world cannot go around without Gemini energy. Having a first house that's ruled by Mercury is going to make you obviously very smart, but also very interested in learning, consistently learning. Your intellect is almost like a part of who you are. Whenever you gain new things, whenever you gain new knowledge, you're also changing who you are to kind of adapt that new knowledge that you have. So obviously you want to check out your Mercury placement, because that's going to give you a lot more insight onto who you are and your first house and all that. But here are some celebrities who have a Gemini rising, right? So we got Lady Gaga. Her chart ruler, aka Mercury, is in her Pisces 10th house of career, public image, and reputation. Obviously, she's a very famous singer. We've also got Drew Barrymore. Her Mercury is in her Aquarius 9th house, which is all about long-term traveling and even social media to an extent. I think having a chart ruler in the 9th house is actually a prominent thing with actors, actually. And lastly, we've also got Amy Winehouse. Rest in peace to her. She had her Mercury in Virgo in the 4th house of home, family, personal life, etc. Those are just some celebrity examples of Gemini risings and where their chart ruler is. So pull out your birth chart, look. Where is your Mercury? What is it doing? What are the aspects it's making to other planets? That's going to give you a lot more information than I can just from this one reading. Anyways, now let's go ahead and talk about your lovers, your type. So if the first house is in Gemini, it rules over the south. The 7th house, which is directly opposite the first house, rules over the other. In traditional astrology, the 7th house rules over marriage. And, you know, in a more modern sense, we mostly look at, you know, partners, you know, business partnerships, marriage partners, romantic partners, you know, whatever you want to call it, just people that you tend to get along with very well. Gemini energy is very attracted to Sagittarius energy. Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign. It's very fun, it's very fiery, very passionate. They're very optimistic and typically very lucky people. Also very smart, because both Gemini and Sagittarius are interested in learning and traveling, you know, just broadening their horizons. Like, that's generally what you have in common with Sagittarius people. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the planet of good luck. Basically, Jupiter in astrology is referred to as one of the benefics, which basically just wants to bring you good things all the time. So here's where there's a little bit of a hiccup. If you were born in Gen Z, then you most likely have Pluto and Chiron in your Sagittarius 7th house. So Pluto rules over transformation, power, influence, control, manipulation, trigger warnings, and Chiron isn't a planet, but it's actually an asteroid that rules over, you know, a wound, but also the same healing that comes from getting hurt. So a lot of people who are Gen Z actually have Pluto and Chiron conjunct to each other. I think if you're born around like 1999 to 2001, you probably have that conjunction, I'm pretty sure. But anyways, having both Pluto and Chiron in your 7th house just mean that your relationships and marriages can be a bit triggering. Although as a Gemini rising, you're typically very positive about the outlook of your relationships, you just have to be careful of the power dynamics and, you know, manipulating other people or other people manipulating you, because that Pluto energy kind of goes, you know, back and forth. Now, what's interesting about having Pluto in an angled house, the angled houses being 1, 4, 7, and 10, but having Pluto in the 7th house just means that you can gain a lot of power, you know, over other people. So you definitely want to be careful that you're not using that in the wrong way. Now, At the end of the day, your 7th house still is ruled by Jupiter, so it's still, you know, in a better condition. So it's still going to bring you good things. I just think you just have to work through your triggers and just make sure that you're being like a good, honest person when it comes to your partnerships or choosing good, honest people. Anyways, Gemini risings also have a Cancer 2nd house. So the 2nd house is kind of like your bank account. It's basically your relationship to money. It's your relationship to food. It's the things that you value. You know, it's your self-worth. Having Cancer in the 2nd house means that Gemini risings can be very emotional spenders. And that's because your 2nd house is ruled by the moon. So whatever your moon sign is and the aspects that it's making is going to give you a lot more information on your 2nd house. But at the end of the day, you're just more likely to spend a lot more when you're either really happy or really upset. Cancer is also the sign of the home and family, so your family might have this like huge influence over your money. If the 2nd house is your actual bank account, then your 8th house is the deposits in a way. So the 8th house is one of the money houses as well, but the 8th house also rules over sex. It rules over transformation, spirituality. The 8th house is a very hidden house of your birth chart, so it's not something that you can see with the naked eye. The 8th house's energy in your life is going to be found in your deepest journals, like your deepest, darkest secrets, like your deepest, darkest night of like just feeling like intense emotion. That's your 8th house, right? Having Capricorn in the 8th house just means that you're probably more likely to be sexually attracted to people who have a lot of Capricorn energy in their charts. But also Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is known as one of the malefics in astrology, which kind of brings a bit of trouble wherever it goes. Saturn is the planet of hard lessons. So over time, Gemini risings might find themselves having harder financial lessons or just having to learn certain lessons regarding sex, regarding spirituality. The thing about Saturn is that wherever it is, it's slowly but surely building a stable foundation. So it's like stability does not just happen overnight in your sex life and in your bank account. It's going to take time and it's going to take work. Aside from that, Gemini risings also have a Leo 3rd house. So the 3rd house is all about how you communicate with other people, and it also rules over your siblings, your neighbors, you know, people you see on a day-to-day basis, but mostly we'll be focusing on how Gemini risings communicate with other people. So having Leo, any house that you have Leo in is where you are going to shine the most. It's where you're going to be very sparkly, dazzly, you know, it's just where you're being radiant. Other people can see that in your conversational skills. You know, the house you have Leo in is where you attract the most attention. And so you definitely attract attention in the way that you communicate with people. You know, you're very animated when you talk about things, especially things that you love or your creative projects. Now, your 3rd house is ruled by your sun, so of course, go ahead and look at your sun sign placement. Pull up your chart if you haven't already pulled up your birth chart. Pull it up now. Directly opposite the 3rd house is your 9th house. The 9th house is all about long-term travels. It's all about communication to another extent, and slightly ruling over social media. 9th house is all about long-term travels, like these long, far vacations that you go on. But also the 9th house is sometimes referred to as the house of God. Like, what do you really believe deep down is true about the world? Like, do you believe in God? Do you not believe in God? Do you belong to a religion? The 9th house is also one of the spiritual houses, and it also rules over college and academia. So looking at your 9th house will tell you a lot about your college experience and your attitude towards college and learning. Now, having Aquarius in the 9th house, if you are Gen Z, you most likely have your Neptune and your Uranus here. Neptune being the planet of confusingness, illusions, but also creativity, but also addiction, and Uranus being the planet of very shocking revelation, very shocking change. So very shocking things can happen to you while you're traveling, or while you're at college, or while you're learning something new, or maybe even while you're at church, because that technically falls into the 9th house type of thing. So very like random things can happen to you there. Doesn't necessarily have to mean that they're bad things, of course, just very random happenings, you know, in those areas of your life. Having your Neptune there just means that you are very creative whenever you're teaching other people, whenever you're learning. You're just you have a very open mind when it comes to things like that. But also that religion and those really deep thoughts about life can really kind of confuse you sometimes. Gemini risings also have a Virgo 4th house. So the 4th house is all about home, family, and your private life. So it's not hidden like the 8th house and the 12th houses are, but it's at the very bottom of the chart, meaning the least amount of people in your life get to see this side of you. So whenever you're interacting with your family, you might have more Virgo traits. Very particular, very perfectionist, very organized, Or if that's not how you act towards your family, you might have had a family who was very organized in particular. Virgo is also the sign of innocence, so you might have had a very innocent childhood as well. Either way, your 4th house is ruled by Mercury, so of course go ahead and look at your Mercury sign. It's going to give you a lot more information about your family, and the aspects that it's making to other planets will tell you about the conditions of the family. But what's interesting is that your chart ruler is ruling over both your 1st house and your 4th house. Basically, in regular terms, your relationship to your family is very essential to who you are. And I would not be shocked to see that Gemini risings have a huge emotional attachment to their families, even into adulthood. So directly opposite the 4th house is the 10th house, which is at the very top of the chart. It is seen by the most amount of people in your life. The 10th house rules over your career, public image, reputation. Gemini risings having a Pisces 10th house might mean that the type of career that they're in is very emotionally invested, possibly being a therapist or a musician, someone who is known for being very creative. If you find yourself in a career that does not engage your emotions in some way, you might not be completely happy. Obviously, everyone's going to be different, and this is hugely going to depend on both your Jupiter and Neptune placements. But Piscean energy is run by its intuition and its emotions. So I think Gemini risings can just feel when a certain career or job just is not for them. Gemini risings also have Libra in the 5th house. So the 5th house is all about creativity, it's all about your romantic life, it's all about children, and it's also about sex. And you have Libra here. Libra is a sign that is ruled by Venus, and Venus just wants to bring harmony to everywhere it is. Libra is the masculine Venus sign, so it's a lot more communication centered than Taurus is. Gemini risings might find themselves very easily being able to communicate their creativity, or just put their creativity into words, put it down on a paper if you're a writer, put it into a painting if you're an artist, like those types of things. Also, you might be more sexually attracted to people who have Libra placements because of this, or you might even have a child who has a Libra placement at some point. That's because the 5th house rules over both sex and children. So definitely whenever it's Libra season, whenever there's a Libra moon, Libra Venus, whenever Libra is around in the air, use protection, friend. But anyways, directly opposite the 5th house is the 11th house. So the 11th house rules over your long-term friends and networking, and also just communities that you belong to. So for example, if you belong to a certain church, that falls underneath the 11th house. If you once belonged to the One Direction fandom, that counts as the 11th house. Just a group of people that you think very similarly with. Now, Geminis have Aries in their 11th house. So even if you haven't known an Aries placement for very long, sometimes it'll feel like you've been friends with them forever. And that's just because you tend to gravitate towards people who are very passionate, who are very loving, who are very independent and not afraid to be themselves. The 11th house just tells you what you value in a friend, and you value Aries energy. The 11th house can also show you how you act around your friends, so you can act a little bit more like an Aries when you're around them, very passionate, very childlike sometimes, just very fun. Now, lastly, the 11th house also rules over, your dreams, hopes, and wishes. So Aries people are more likely to be more supportive of your dreams than other people are. But Gemini risings also have Scorpio in the 6th house. The 6th house is the house of work, physical health, your job, your daily routine, your pets, all that jazz. Having Scorpio here just means that you might have to have a very set daily routine, because Scorpio is a fixed water sign. Water representing emotions, and fixed representing not a fan of change. So Gemini risings most likely have a very stable, day-to-day routine type of thing. Now, your 6th house is ruled by both Mars and Pluto. You might find it very easy to start arguments with people in your daily life. But on the other hand, another way that this can manifest itself is that Gemini risings might find themselves being active or working out, just doing very Martian activities like working out, swimming, playing a sport. You might find yourself doing that on a daily basis, or needing to do that on a daily basis. Your 6th house is also ruled by Pluto. So Pluto is the planet of power and control and influence. So definitely be careful of other people trying to tell you what to do on a day-to-day basis, trying to assert their power over you. Are you trying to tell other people what they should be doing on a day-to-day basis? Directly opposite your 6th house is your 12th house. The 12th house is all about the mental health. It's all about subconscious emotions, what's going on. This 12th house is one of the hidden houses in your birth chart, and it also represents spirituality as well. So having Taurus in the 12th house just means that your emotions, deep down, your subconscious is very stable. Taurus is known for being very stable, very chill, very homebody, very laying around type of of energy. So I actually like this for you guys, especially because y'all are Gemini rising. So you're very mercurial. You know, you're ruled by your head. You're, you know, constantly having all these ideas and everything. So I really like that you guys have the Taurus 12th house, because your subconscious will be a lot more quiet compared to your active mind. The 12th house is more of like what's beneath the surface once you really dig into your emotions and how you are. Being ruled by Mercury just means that you're naturally thinking about all these things. Like more often than not, people who have mercurial placements like Virgo or Gemini tend to be ADHD. Obviously not all of you guys, but just in my experience and what I've seen, you know, Gemini risings often have very like quick, fast-paced minds, but you know, you guys have a very stable interior foundation, you know, with that Taurus 12th house. But anyways, thank you Gemini risings for watching this video. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to let me know down in the comments what your Mercury sign is and what house it's in, so I can get some information from you.